Creating the Perfect Company from the organizational experts, Multiview Incorporated. This content is based on MBI's work with over 1,300 organizations, extracting 989 data elements with 922 cross-calculations over 27 years on a monthly basis, and then systematizing the operational success patterns of the 90th percentile. Our intent is to get beyond the brag and the boast, and simply share insights from our experience without manipulation or coercion to sell anything, except helpful ideas. These messages range from intimate recordings from the Awakened Forest to concerts, national conferences, and broadcasts.
So I'm just breaking down, we're screening for comprehension of vision and values, technical competencies, cultural fit, with extreme emphasis on accountability. Come join us. Again, these people tend to be more motivated than other people. They do not have great fear of taking tests and being accountable. They're more likely to be lifelong learners. They know how to work a computer. And we got some indication of their communication skills. And we also have a good idea about their professional judgment, and all that. And there's a whole slide on HR practices. Use compensation to smoke out people that are unwilling to bet on themselves in the organization. Use compensation to attract and retain the most talented people. Again, don't hire people that need to be managed. Use videos when hiring people. These are kind of HR-ish things. Hire people that naturally do the behaviors to be successful. Basically, their defaults are already identified. Positive eye contact, energy level, voice, tone, all that. Determine ways to locate talent already employed in the organization without input from the immediate managers. This is where you get to know them. And I'll just go ahead and skip ahead here. We want at least 2 videos on every employee. Every employee, I don't care if we have 10,000 employees. We want a video of everybody. The first is teaching. What if they taught well? And just 2 or 3 minutes long. And that's housed in HR. And then we want another video of them explaining accountability, because accountability or awakening or enlightenment or liberation, however you want to phrase it, is such a valuable topic. And so we want a video on that. What does this allow us to do? That means that in a rapid or a short amount of time, if I have a need of a leader, or put this way, if I know this, have this knowledge, I can say, we need to keep our eyes on this person. They got leadership, they taught so well and all that. We need to perhaps put them on the leadership track. Or if you lose a wheel due to whatever, you can quickly determine the talent that you have in the organization based on these videos. And we can avoid what I'll call the PEAT principle. This is all in the book, by the way. What is the PEAT principle? Well, the first CFO that I worked under directly as an accounting manager, his name was Pete. Pete was a guy that got riffed out of some hospital system or whatever. And I remember him making a statement to the executive leadership team that, Andrew's really good. And if Andrew works under me for a decade or so, he might end up being a pretty good CFO. Well, I had his job in 6 months. Because some things went so wrong, and me not knowing anything about what I was doing, just did some common Midwestern, good values, seems like a good, and that's why we got these different pay systems and stuff that had never been done in healthcare. And we just rocketed. And so I had his job. But here's the point with the PEAT principle. Your immediate supervisors or leaders will hold down your most talented people. And they can't help themselves almost. How can you say such a thing, Andrew? Why? Here's how I can say it. How many times as a clinical leader or a site leader said, you know, that person, that nurse, that social worker, whatever, should have my job. No, they're so talented, they should be managing me. How many times do you hear that? There's the giveaway. So therefore, as an operational practice, you want to have all these videos that you can rifle through that have to be looked at or reviewed by a level or so, or a level above that immediate manager to identify your talent, especially in the leadership ranks. Again, we have got a complete system on this. Normally, people have to work at the organization from 12 to 18 months in order to actually get that, but you can start to say, you know, that person's going to work out pretty well. But we rarely bring in people from the outside because they're just going to break our business basically. Because if you don't train them, they come in, unless you need a change agent, that's a whole different deal. But if you bring in Billy Bob, what's Billy Bob going to do? Billy Bob's going to put in the Billy Bob system. And everybody working for Billy Bob is going to try to be a hero in the Billy Bob system. And Billy Bob's going to decimate your systems. And guess what? Billy Bob's innocent. He's just doing Billy Bob, just like T-Rex is doing what T-Rex does. That kills stuff and rips stuff up, and that's what T-Rex does. So there's no sense in demonizing T-Rex or Billy Bob. But if Billy Bob had been part of us for 12 to 18 months, they go, okay, here's how they kind of make decisions here. Ooh, high integrity. Okay, we're going to follow through, we're going to communicate well, we're going to do all these things, be sensitive to people's feelings, you know, whatever. Then Billy Bob has a setting for success. But then his team has to produce that contribution margin, financial. We're not going to tell him how to get there. I mean, we'll help him, but he's just managing that result. How he gets there is completely up to Billy Bob. He's liberated. Okay. Okay, I think we've got most of those things. So HR, quite a bit there. Competency tests, phone, all that. Again, when you think about the proof of a person's ability to teach, again, your videos, the visual look, clothes, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, projection, confidence, lack of confidence. Is the person interesting? Do I want to listen to that person? Does the person have a command of the material? Do they know their stuff? Are they organized? Are they note takers? I don't hire people that are not note takers. Because they just might have the smart person. And I realize they're just going to get 10% of what you're talking about normally. What's their body language? Does it match the presentation? There's all this stuff that your videos will tell you. Or when you see the people in person. We do not, on these evaluation phone calls, we don't do a Zoom call. Some people may say, well, we got Zoom now, let's do a Zoom with that person. No, you don't want to see the person, because what happens is when you got them on the phone, that visual will override the voice. Because again, what I say, 85 to 93% of communication is nonverbal. You will override the feeling on the voice. Whereas if you just have the voice, your mind starts to put together the picture already, because you think in terms of pictures. Like if I say the word chair to you, guess what? You think about a chair. If I say table, you think of a table. If I say green elephant, every one of you couldn't even help themselves but think of a green elephant, because we think in pictures. But since most of the care is going to be done via telecommunicative means over the phone, how do they come off to people? That's why you would never do a Zoom for an interview. Not an initial interview. Later on, maybe incorporated. Okay. Already talked about that. And then the interview itself, what's accountability mean to you, situation that has to do with that, and then that video. Sign this release form. There's one in the book that you can take. Sign this, because you don't want someone coming back later on and, whatever. So, and then the offer has to do with compensation. And what's that look like? Before you're fully part of us, you have to be certified in all areas applicable to your work, including phone skills, visit structure, how meetings are run, sunny day language, master teaching methods, and other things. We will evaluate you for a 90-day period to make sure this relationship is working and that all standards are being adhered to. And by the way, here's access to Sunny Day's self-learning modules. We'll see you in, I think it's 14 days. Good luck. Okay, get this. Okay, this is key. This is leading us to the next section. Basically, you got through the interview process. We're going to hire you. There is a probationary period. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And then we start transformation. Because again, you want to get away from orientation and all that. Okay, as a person knows that you have a high accountability culture and that you test, what are they going to do? They're going to dig into the self-learning modules. And here's the thing. These people will come into class before the first day of class, and they will know approximately 60% of the material before class. And that's an excellent situation, because at that point we're in the reinforcement of knowledge or learning phase right from the get-go. And we found this out after, again, I've trained nearly 10,000 clinical managers. And we found this out, that when they knew they had a 200 or 300 question test that they had to get perfect on, man, they were studying on the plane ride there and just getting down with the material, because there's a lot of numbers, or a good amount. There aren't that many numbers really when you get down to it, but that they had to be familiar with and know it. So we'll see in 14 days. Here's access to our Relia system and our self-learning modules. And then they will already come in already knowing. So now we're going to talk about the talent development process, or the talent liberation process. So we've introduced the self-learning modules already with our offer letter, offer box, whatever. Next, I have the CEO or some prominent person in the organization basically run through vision, values, proprietary methods, how we do things. This is kind of the overview of the company, but we want this to have the real, that energetic and all that. This is what this is about. I would even do this before technically people fill out certain forms and things like that. And you might have a few from a legality that you may need to get assigned, but I would minimize that time and get right into it. And then if there's other things you can complete later on at the end of the day or what have you, take care of some of those things later. But you want to get into this selling of the vision, values, and principal ideologies. And you want this in a live setting. Now, with this said, pandemic, a lot of folks went away from live. And lots of Zoom. For a lot of organizations, it was a mistake. Though we can get tremendous amounts even doing this virtual thing. I mean, no question. God knows how much I learn. I mean, I take about 12 college courses a year. That's just my DNA. I love learning. A lot of it's about human behavior, history. I'm pretty pragmatic about, life. About the only fiction I'm interested in is sci-fi, because that has to do with the future. And where am I getting a lot of this? Well, I just repeated exposure to the material by listening to the lectures, watching the lectures, great value. So that's what we're doing here, tremendous. The fact that you can watch it again, and if you need a link, we can get you one afterwards if you want to go through sections of this. But with that said, there's no quite substitute for actually bringing people in to the presence of the teacher. Because I'll just say this, we learn as much from osmosis, being in the energy, the vibration of that teacher, especially if they've developed to a certain level, that just makes it very, very impactful. And when we're at the top, at the mountaintop, and we're looking at nature through the big windows and all that, there's an experience that is, people know it's special time, and that I've got an opportunity to transform my life right now. And let me just describe one of the greatest organizations ever to be on this planet as far as relatively modern organization. And that was Arthur Andersen, which was founded at the turn of the century. And they were the greatest accounting and consulting firm in the world for many years. Arthur Andersen's integrity was so much, when they would audit financial statements, that is, go through the transactions and what have you, to basically say that these financial statements and which loans and all that would be provided based on. Like there's a slight issue with an audit they did with a defense contractor. And all they had to do is change some commentary or some language in the audit. And Arthur Andersen just leans back in his chair in Chicago and says, "There isn't enough money in all of Chicago that would make me change that for you. We said what we mean and we mean what we say." And that signature of Arthur Andersen on those audited statements was more valuable than any other signature in the United States on the bottom of a financial statement. This is where integrity and high standards mean something. It's just this, I try to operate by the same thing. I will not work with bottom feeder organizations, hospice, I don't care how much they're trying to pay us.
Did you know they were a world-class teaching organization too?
What's that?
Arthur Andersen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to describe is basically the way Andersen did it. So how did they train their people? Okay, well they would fly everybody or bring everybody to Chicago. And guess who would teach the course? Arthur and his all-star faculty. And they would personally go through the methods, vision, values, and methods of Andersen. Here's how we do it. We use a red pencil here. We tick this off here. And people are just charged up. And when they had a hiring profile, so HR people, they had a hiring profile. What were they looking for? Young, impressionable kids, first to go to college, kids that had to overcome great obstacles in order to get to college. And from the Midwest was one of those things. So I think that's 6 things. Young, impressionable, farm kids from the Midwest, first to go to college, had to overcome a great obstacle. I guess that's, for me that's 5 or whatever. I may have missed one, but I'm only an accountant. So again, if you came from like wealthy family or they wanted kids that had the struggle. And they were so proud when they got through this rigorous training. So that even when they went out to work as a CFO for different major corporations, which is a very common thing in the accounting profession, when you do their audit, you already know their systems and all that. Guess who they use for their auditing firm? What do people that, some of the folks that did different things with who do they use? They use Multiview. Or some people go from one place, so there's and so there's a lot to learn from the Arthur Andersen situation. Now, here's the problem. Because what happened? They went out of business at a certain point. Why? Because of Enron. Because of bad accounting, bad audit practice, whatever. What went wrong there? Here's what went wrong. Arthur died. And then the smart guys said, Arthur's a little old-fashioned. We could do better here if we kind of relax this standard, or we don't do this, or whatever. And so it's the gradual deterioration of values that causes things like Enron. There's the demise. And Arthur Andersen still exists, the consulting wing. Was it Accenture? Yeah, I think it was just a great one. So there you go. Okay, so we got our Arthur Andersen leader or whoever in the organization. But I like it to come from the top, though, if possible. I realize that we got places and you're spread out all over the country. And there are ways, that you can do it, but there's still no substitute for, that personal experience. Anyway, and there's things that we can suggest for those really, really large organizations that are doing that. Okay, so then an overview of your sunny day model or your organization, how it was created, the patient chair, which we really haven't got into that much, but people understand, how we're doing everything based on the feelings and emotions of people and all that. How they can access resources, what accountability means, all the measurements that we use. I was going to say, here's a breakthrough, and this is not in the manual. Okay, we used to have the all-staff manual, which basically, anyway, there's one there, I think, for all staff. And really the all staff manual, when you think about it, is kind of a dumbed down. It's like, frontline clinicians and stuff don't really need to know what a manager. And so we said, why not? Why not? So one best practice breakthrough is we have one manual, the Extraordinary Clinical Manager. This would be Workbook 7, that we use for training everybody from frontline to managers. In fact, you can even replace, I'll say, RN, or really, you want to look at, maybe I should say it more like this. All your clinicians should probably be viewed as extraordinary clinical leaders, because they're leading people, or teaching people, leading people through an experience, the experience of the death process with which we are most familiar. And we can only afford to have these extraordinary people. Okay, so what's the value? First of all, it simplifies things because you only have one manual to keep up for the organization, or at least the primary. I'm not saying you're not going to have supplementary. People learn all the metrics, how they're measured. They understand why we use these metrics. So right there, you kind of disintegrate the us versus them, the corporate versus clinical divides that exist in so many organizations. And also, if all clinicians understand the job of the clinical or site manager or team leader, they can hold that leader accountable. Think about that. They can say, that's not how we run a meeting at Sunny Day. That's not how we do a visit. It says here, this is how we do it. But your written manuals are so critical, because again, you don't want that oral narrative. People are only going to retain about 10% of it. You need it written so that it commonizes the knowledge for everybody. And also provides, again, this mechanism for self-learning. Your trainings, again, are a joke without written, comprehensive manuals combined with testing or evaluating student learning. Anyway, that's a breakthrough. It's not in the book, but it's something we're using at hospices right now. Okay, so we got the vision, overview of the model, and then we go into perfect visits, or perfect phone interactions. The reason we do perfect phone interactions there is, first of all, people are crappy on the phones. I mean, we serve, or get hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, even a week, from hospices. And Nancy, I mean, we're not trying to take a dig at anybody, but what do you experience when you're calling up hospices? And
A huge variability of service, but rarely is it excellent.
yeah, rarely is it excellent. I think that's the key point. When we find that if we expose people to 2 or 3 hours of training on that topic alone, the quality will go up about 70%. And there's a very specific way about how to do that. And we've got a lot of materials on this. And there's even more being created, but how to be extraordinary on the phone. Again, people call Multiview, they enjoy the hold music, for example, the hold experience, that they ask to be put back on hold. I always think that's funny, but that happens frequently. Or do you not find that just hilarious?
No, there's one person in particular who's rather prickly that I had worked with. When I first started working here, I worked with her quite extensively. And one day I put her on hold for some reason, and I came back from the hold, and she was a happy person. She wasn't prickly anymore. Yeah. And she commented about the hold music, and I thought, note to self, Nancy, always put her on hold.
Of course, and everybody's going, what are they talking about here? Here, we put all kind of old TV show themes and even commercials and all that. And all I know is that no matter what, it projects happy times usually, or images. Like if suddenly, the theme from Mary Tyler Moore, who can turn the world on with a smile? Who can make a day? Whatever it was. Anyway, and suddenly, you're back at mom's house on Saturday night and popcorn, or whatever your routine was.
It's a connection too. It's all of a sudden now you're talking to somebody who has experienced the same thing you've experienced, not just the lady that I call at MVI when my checks won't print because whatever reason. And so it just softens people. Yeah,
and also you're conscious of the demographic you're hitting, but it's different. Okay, but we're doing that memory thing. So again, 3 or 4 hours. We can increase people's competencies on the phone. Very small investment, big return. Then we go right into the perfect visit with perfect documentation. And so when you think about this, these other topics, they don't take days. I mean, those are just, an hour, half hour, a couple hours, and then boom. We are right in the perfect visit, and which is really the guts of the whole thing, because we know that focusing on that, again, is going to solve virtually every quality and financial woe in the organization. And you might spend a couple days on this, 2-3 days. With existing organizations, sometimes we can do it in 2 or 3 half days, get people trained up in it. But we want this to be really, really impactful, where they're going through the labs, and right then they're just blown away. The very best lab situations that you can put together, you don't always have to spend lots of money on this stuff. I mean, we can do it with a couple blow-up dolls and a couple speakers. But you do us good and you make it as special as you can. Then basic documentation is taught, and what we teach, just is really how to document slow decline. So we're always referencing the start of care with whatever is happening now, but to do that, you have to break the habit of clinicians wanting to document just what's happening on that visit. That's incorrect documentation. We're always referencing, functional decline, whatever, with the big picture view. And then also tell me how grim it is, because the goal of documentation is obviously, yes, we want to communicate to our team so that we can provide this coherent, integrated, interdisciplinary experience. But we also want to make the folks at the FI in the 10,000 cubicles there puke when they read our chart. That is, we want to impact them emotionally. We want to make them feel sorry for this patient's situation. Even pointing out, again, just how long it takes to do normal function. And so, you really, and we just go through the entire documentation thing. We do not have any problem getting clinicians to document at the point of care. It's a non-issue when people teach it well. And also when you sensitize your system, that we know that if you're documenting at night and that boom, your paycheck is automatically hit. Because again, the documentation has a deterioration rate of a French fry. Over 70%, again, of the details of the documentation are lost in only 6 hours. That's according to an Allscripts study years ago. So but anyway, but you just cover all of that and how to write a great note. So therefore, in the teaching environment, we're thinking about increasing people's capacity to communicate, or literacy even. What is a good note? What's too much? What's too little? It's that written narrative. And when we're doing magic engagements, one of the first things we get going is perfect documentation. And we request 4 charts. We say to people development or education or whatever, bring me a perfect COPD chart. Okay. No, we don't have a perfect COPD. How about a CHF? No, don't have that. A dementia? No. How about like some generic cancer, lung cancer, whatever? Don't have that. And then you look at them with your steely eyes and you go, how in the hell do you expect any of your clinicians to document well when you can't even produce a chart? And now I'm talking about written charts, not just on the computer, though on the computer is one thing, but that has those written out and show that slow decline. And even providing people cheat sheets of language so they don't have to be using the same phrases over and over, but very emotionalized language that they can use so that when they're in low energy states, they can document well. This is high value people development stuff I'm going through right now. It could be the difference between you being in business or not in business, or owing millions or hundreds of millions like San Diego back after an OIG audit. Okay. Revolutionary bereavement might talk about how we're doing things way different beyond cognitive things, going into much more experiential things induced by technologies that our hospice may use and all that. The business of hospice, we teach the numbers so that there's no confusion about what we're measuring, why we're measuring, and we really wipe out that divide between clinical and admin by everybody being taught it. Computer curricula, discipline or specific discipline breakouts. And then clinical modules. Okay, in the education area, the visit structure, of course, is not clinical. Meaning, that it's not wrapped up in clinical skills. It's the reason that I, or so many multi-view people, or whatever, we teach the visit structure all over the place because it's not clinical. It has to do with creation of the feeling for the patient and family. Being sensitive to that. All of your clinical skills are taught in separate clinical modules or self-learning modules. How you do your wound care, how you do breakthrough pain, how you do a catheter in a lazy boy. I mean, whatever you're into and what you feel like is a skill that they need to know, those are separate, and they will change over time. Like wound care, like, hey, let's get out the blow dryer after we do that. I mean, these are, now it's like we don't need that. Or I'm just saying it changes. And when you have this more modular approach to it, it allows you to innovate and put the most current practices in your Relias or your self-learning system. And I'll just say this, whenever we make these, sometimes we concentrate on the visuals of how to do that clinical practice, but just as equally valuable is the audio. So by ripping the audio file off that and putting it into MP3s or CDs or whatever you have to do so that people can actually play them in the car, where they can just temporarily, not listen to AC/DC or whatever they're into, and they can listen to this, whatever best known practice or practice that you're trying to teach, whether perfect visit, documentation, clinical practice. And you think about that, once they have actually seen the visual, what plays in people's mind? The actual thing, like Gone with the Wind. If you've seen it one time, or maybe a few times, let's say one time, and then you listen to the audio, suddenly that whole movie plays out in your head. And that's what I mean. Your mind works in pictures. And that's why that 85 to 93% just really indicates, hey, my mind works in feelings first and pictures. And that's how my memory is created. Okay. Again, kind of the outcome we want is that staff want to believe that they are talented and are well trained, and we must transform this desire from a want into a certainty. And let's just go through this. What is the sequence to use here to develop people, especially when there's large-scale retraining that needs to take place? You want to move to the model, let's say. I got a lot of employees. How do I pull this off? And I'll probably go through this pretty quick. And if you go to page 173, first of all, you have to train yourself. So that CEO needs to understand the model. What are we doing with this? Instead of the chief teaching officer. Then we want to make sure that the manager or leader of people development is a wow teacher. When I say a wow teacher, it's like commands that attention, has experience, interesting, all that stuff. Then obviously we train our managers, because a manager is a multiplier. And untrained managers will defeat you. Or let me just say this, non-believers will defeat you. So you could have the most manicured, miraculous, transformational training experience. Train them up perfectly, and then they go to the site. And if that manager or leader goes, well, I know how they taught you up at corporate, but let me tell you how it's done in the real world. They will just have defeated you. So you got to have these believers. That's another reason you got to have these folks that have been with you for 12, 18 months or whatever. And then we train our best staff, usually in small groups. I tend to, your A players, you might call them. Normally we'll train them in groups of 4, 5, 6, probably is about the most. because you want to have enough individual. But if you're training your very best people, they got the greatest, best attitudes, they're the easiest to train, they're your bright cookies. And even if you screw up in your initial trainings, they're much more forgiving. And they'll actually say, hey, this might even be better. But they're the people that just mature folks you want to work with. And then you start working through your B and C level people. And then you find that you don't even need as many people as you have. Most organizations think they don't, like HR, we got all these open positions. Well, you may have some critical open positions or whatever, but we find that most hospices are overstaffed. Just because the standards are so low. And so they have to have all this redundancy, all kinds of things there. Anyway, so that's the way we kind of, again, you don't even have to worry about your D-level folks because they're not going to be working with you they're going to be working for your competitors. It was where they should be. So with that said, it's pretty much lunchtime. And, let's go ahead and take our half hour and eat our lunch. And then we will reconvene and keep going through the system. So we've been through, again, talent attraction, talent selection. We're working on the development. That's where we're going to spend so much more time even after this. But we'll be hitting how do you retain these people, that last process. So let's go ahead and have lunch, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a good lunch, pizza or whatever. That's what we did. So it was delightful. And so we're talking about people development, but again, your cornerstone concept that you will try to adapt, or the pattern that you'd want to adapt to most of your people development initiatives, would be System 7. Again, because it eliminates, it makes it impossible for there to be knowledge deficits in the organization. It also hits on most of the modes in which human beings learn. Probably not so much the sense of smell and stuff, but definitely tactile and visual and auditory and all these things creating, sensations. And again, we'll hit that a little bit more later on. The other thing is that in our manuals, if we take a look at page 175, in people development, I think there are, again, these additional considerations. Literacy. What levels of literacy are needed in our organization? And again, you would technically establish that by positions and all that. You think about the idea of liberation or self-actualization or self-realization. Well, so much of it has to do with education. And, like if someone wants to liberate themselves, for example, economically, normally the path will begin with some sort of education, whether it's, from school, formal schools, which in some places, if you want to be a CPA or some other professions, that is mandatory. Others, it's real world, aligning yourself with mentors. And I think you do the latter no matter what. People that have actually done it. And are people, especially people that are not always talking from a theoretical position. But rather, hey, they've been in the trenches and all that. But literacy, and one of the things, again, in promoting life skills is, again, public speaking. And, that will change people's lives right there. And you think about, like, the video, well, the reason we use video so much because, there's people don't always know how they come off to other people. They're quite oblivious about this. And suddenly, oh, is that you? Yeah. Is that you? Is that how I really look? Oh, yeah, that's how you really look. And suddenly all kinds of self-correction enters the consciousness of this person that was oblivious of how they came off to others. And amazing things happen there. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But note-taking, again, a critical skill. I normally don't hire people that don't take notes. There's so many practical topics that can be taught when you're developing your talents. I mean, for example, I know people have all their technologies and stuff. One of my secrets is what? A clipboard. I have a Word document that I update every morning. And with everything I want to do, and the list gets long as if you don't fulfill certain things, but I'm always prioritizing it. What is the highest good, the most important thing? And so you have it there that you can always reference in low energy states or high energy states. There it is right before you. It feels good to take things off the list, but you're reshuffling it, but it's right there. Because people always say, Andrew, you're involved with all these companies and enterprises and just, and this is stuff even outside of Multiview and all that. How do you keep it all together? Okay, this is a skill. It's a skill set, and I don't know who I imitated, but that's worked. So you almost always will see, Nancy, you always see me pretty much with a clipboard. It's kind of weird, probably. It's like, man, he is married to that clipboard. And, some people can try to do it on their phone and all that. And anyway, you just have to find something that works for you that is effective. But that's an example of an IRM, an image recall mechanism that we'll talk about, and is part of creating these conditions for people to be successful. Computer skills, reading aloud. And by the way, on page 176, there is some kind of science behind learning. So when I said that you're getting the effectiveness or the results that you design in your system, that's where you reference 10% of the material will be retained by a student that only listens. And then it increases 40 to 50, listens and takes notes, and what have you. So there's some reference to that. Okay, let's get into our talent retention process. So this is the fourth process. And here's the cool thing, is the same things that you use to attract talent are the same things you use to retain talented people. However, there's a couple other things that we have to consider that really impact these when retaining people. Okay, so why do people stay with organizations? Because of the work atmosphere, that inspirational, electric, spiritual atmosphere that's being served up every day. And when you really get down to it, it's pretty logical. This is how I'm spending my life. And in hospice, think about this. Here we are racing towards death. We all know how this turns out. We all know how this turns out. Why would any thinking person spend their life where there's options of where you work, like America? Why in the world would you spend it throwing your life away on something that you don't want to do? Doesn't even make sense. Even the idea of retirement is a strange idea. It's a relatively modern idea. And I get that, you may even like your work, but there's a point where, hey, I'd just like to do whatever. But I think if you're really kind of, you should be living the best life and really be enjoying what you're doing. To me, it just seems like a very foreign thing. I don't even understand it on a certain level, because I'm living the best life like right now. And So all these investment advisors, by which most of them are very average. The thing about this, where people even put their money. I mean, I seek the most elite folks there are. And boy, does it make a difference. I mean, investment people, where you put it and all that. So there's a real practical thing that you could do. I mean, as far as to help employees out. Anyway. So people stay at organizations for the new life, the environment. They also, like the super pay. And the more they do it, the more confident they get, in themselves. And they see that change in their life. But in order to retain people, 70% of the retention of talent is going to come from the relationship of the immediate manager or site leader with the employee. So when we were building that Baldrige winning organization, Norman pointed this out. And I'm always so grateful, because that's where it's like, man, Norman, thank you so much. For pointing that. So when we're constructing organizations, we build it around developing the extraordinary clinical leader, like the one workbook and all that because of this. But 70% of what? The development, the morale, and the retention is going to come from that relationship. And people will quit if they are unhappy with that relationship. And they have to be respected on all kinds of levels. So we focus on that. And so the question there, if we're going to put somebody in that position, are they an inspiring person? And you think about the word inspire. It has movement, motivation. Motivation is the job. Get people moving in the direction of the organization. And are they inspirational? Are they impressive with their life? Are they living a great life? It's one thing, like, to listen to like a therapist tell you how to live a great life. It is quite another thing to actually be in the presence of someone that's living a great life. That's what people want. They want the real deal, not the near beer. And that's why we sexy up the job, we pay us well, it's richly for these clinical leaders, because they're 70%ers. And I actually, what I like to call them anymore, the 70%ers, because that puts that percentage into everybody's heads, and everybody knows that's where the bulk of the training is going to happen. It's not going to come from the process we just described. Just think about that. We just went through this big process, and that'll only get you so far. And then it comes right down to that clinical manager. That hopefully will say, hey, I saw your videos in the lab when you were in transformation. They were great. Now I'm going to be riding along with you for the next couple weeks or whatever to make sure that we're doing it just like they taught you in transformation. And this is going to be great. And so they build that relationship because they have time. Because here's the thing is, when people have time, when people are doing things to high standards, these leaders aren't running around putting out fires with their asbestos high heels or whatever. Because, it's not like we have a bunch of service failures around here. It's not like we have low productivity. It's not like we have any documentation that's going wrong. So I can do ride-alongs. And now, with that said, those things can not happen unless the compensation. We've never seen a situation where it has been achieved and maintained without the compensation being wired to those kinds of results, where every paycheck tells the employee whether they're in standard or not in standard with their documentation or productivity. Therefore, we remove the need for the manager to have to be the bearer of bad news, to say, hey, you're a bad girl. bad boy. I mean, that's the feel people get. Instead, the system does it, and of course it's done with a non-wounding email. It's very important how you language things. They are alerted, hey, your documentation, patient whatever, non-standard language, whatever it is. And at that point, the manager's copied on that. And so they go, hey, I know you got the email. Let me help you be successful in the Sunny Day system. So it's more of a white knight helper type. And that transforms the clinical position. And really, when you get down to it, at Multiview, we are taking the negative aspects of management away from the manager. There are enough times still where they will have to address non-standard performance. But the skill that we want in manager is this: the skill of doing accountability without losing talented people. So that's why the systems do so much of our work. Okay, the last element of our talent retention has to do with life skill programs. And basically, these can be super spiritually oriented. They could be just very practical things of how to organize your life better. It could be literacy things, developing better public speaking or communication. It can be a broad range of things that are non-mandatory. And you might do it, you'll find that you've got all kinds of talented people already within your organization, since they tend to be spiritually oriented. And they have great things to share. They have great things to share. And then sometimes you want to bring in a speaker from outside. I mean, I do that for hospices sometimes, where I'll come in and we'll go over stuff. And, people like that. So life skill things on a regular basis. So to me, those are the big things, and that's where retaining talent. Let's go through retaining talent a little bit more. Again, the loss of talent is the number one destroyer of value. This is why an organization with 25% loss of clinicians or nurses or whatever cannot have any legitimate claim to being a quality organization, because it's not possible to lose that kind of percentage and still be a quality. Like you consider, you lose a great a super leader in the organization. Well, that is a great multiplier. Hard to replace some talents. Okay. We already talked about the central demographic of hospice people. They're attracted to this work, seek meaning, purpose, spirituality. Again, we don't want to see turnover greater than 10%. And that normally means that an organization is not serving up the spirituality. And so when we look at the outliers in our hospice world, you'll notice that all of the elite organizations that have been there and have remained there, they all have this spiritual DNA. For example, the most profitable hospice we have right now has a profit margin of 47%. And I say that, and some of you are probably disbelievers and say, well, that's not true. And when I first heard this, I actually didn't believe it myself, except for we had actually helped them from their very first patient. Anyway, they heard about Multiview, and so we helped form them. And they were just using MVI practices, and we could verify every number they had. I mean, they did magic, and this is, out west. And now, I know their census is way over 100 and some percent, growth. Of course, we started doing magic with them. And I think their census is about 60 something or whatever. Now it's like 200 and whatever. And this is where there's more blades of grass than there are human beings. And it's like, oh my God, how do you do this? Okay, so what we're really talking about is this intentional creation of the workplace is how you're going to retain people. And one of the most underutilized ideas in most organizations. Okay, so auspices in the 90th percentile have these highly spiritual cultures. This is the unobvious factor in these successful hospices. And yeah. I mean, there's just all kinds of things. I've already pointed out a few. I'm not going to go through all of these. But, you know, just practical things that people can do to advance people's spirituality. Just start out by being a decent person. I mean, if you borrow someone's lawnmower, return it. And, yeah, or a book from the library. Or if you say you're going to do something, do it. I mean, write it down if you need to, but don't forget. You know, and all that. Commit yourself to seeking the truth for its own sake. And this always involves letting go of pride. A lot of times it's the pride in even belief systems. You know, I'll just say this. I don't know what, it hit me one day that I had to get really even beyond my belief systems and how I perceive the world and really loosen up. And that was great, you know, great liberation, because again, life is kind of beyond language. It's experiential. I mean, we got a definition of what an apple is, but you can't eat that definition in Webster's dictionary. Or you can just try to describe it in language, but that's still an abstraction. Whereas real living is touching that apple, looking at how beautiful it is, actually tasting. There are so many people that eat that never taste their food. That's the stuff that can be taught as we increase people's consciousness levels. And we'll talk about that later on. Surrounding yourself with beauty, the work environment with beauty to the degree that we can. Again, and just directing our intention, or I'll say spiritual goals. Like right now, I am so working on well, I'll just tell you, unconditional love, which is, again, it's a calibration of 540. And you know, I definitely drop out of that sometimes, where I get into being critical. Hell, sometimes I'll go clear down to 150, which is, you know, I don't want to say that's anger, but because I really don't. That is just so rare at a certain point. But we all are kind of this oscillation. But you know, you start to go to set things like that as a spiritual goal, and the whole world will start to become recontextualized. That you lose your hostility towards anything, your criticalness. You really get to a place of forgiveness, because you know, we realize, you know, that basically anytime that you have anger, it's a result of lack of humility, usually, or pride or whatever. You start to see everybody as innocent. Actually believe the Nazarene when he said, forgive them for they know not what they do. You know, perhaps the greatest thing about human beings with 5 senses to interpret the world is that we are ignorant. And how could it not be that way with an infinite universe? You know, gratitude is another thing that surfaces when, the thing is, you kind of know you're going, there's a directional correctness as far as in spiritual paths. And I'm just kind of throwing out features or things that where you kind of know you're getting there, you know, and that's kind of that path of enlightenment. And again, which changes the worldview, obviously your experience of it, your degree of happiness that goes up. Again, we'll take a look at this more. Yeah, anyway, that's it. Other like practical tools in spirituality, intuition. How do you develop intuition? You know, that's something, there's just inner promptings that we all have. Again, we don't know where our decisions come from. And the fact that most talented clinicians, for example, can go into a nurse or a patient setting and somehow surmise, oh, we got, whatever, there's been a disruption in the force. There's been, something's going on here. Relaxation tools, how do you use like anchoring techniques and things like that? So if you come out of a frustrated patient visit, how do you take yourself down to a relaxed state in moments? Just by learning some tools and all that. So, I mean, these are practical spiritual things. Essence, how to really tune in with the most authentic you rather than the programming that has been done by society, and the rules that you need to feel bad about this. Well, maybe you don't need to feel bad about something. It just could be a projection of value. That's not your value anymore. Energy. Just really understanding. I'll just say this. I think that we live in an electromagnetic world. We have poles. We have North Pole. We have South Pole. What do two poles of a magnet do? They cause movement. And all of life seems to be movement, change, or changements. I like that. Or even the desire for progress, or to get better, or improve, are all movement, when you really think about it. Because what? We get bored with the same. I mean, we may like the meatloaf dinner, but man, we don't want it like all the time. I mean, we like puzzles. We like challenges. We want to mix a little of the dark with the light. I mean, there's a naughty side and nice side, and being able to reconcile those things. When I say naughty, that's another projection but you know what I mean. I mean, just like a diet. I mean, there's times when it's just totally right to pig out and not feel guilty about it. But to be free, But I'm just going to, all this is, again, how we experience simplicity. How much is enough? Money. What is the spirituality with money? The heart. I mean, what is this thing that's inside of us? Is it connected to the mind? Creativity, how to do that. I'm doing a workshop at like the Monroe Institute in December. That's where they have all the scientists and all that and study the brain waves and all that. And we're doing some joint ventures with them. But again, because you used to like Hemisync or some of these mind technologies. Well, I've made millions of dollars and built the studios and all this stuff from going into these in-between states for prolonged periods of time. But then somehow being able to come out of it and retain it. That's the hard part. And then, you write it down. But that's where I had like the vision. It's after my son passed. And it said, basically I was using Hemisync and it put me in this altered state at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I saw a studio and kind of a voice said, but not in a voice, it was more of a feeling, that build the studio, people will come from all around the world, and you will have these hit records. Well, boy, if that hasn't happened. Boy, if that hasn't happened. And anyway, I think the thing is, the other thing you can do with this stuff is you can make very memorable events. That truly do change people's lives. Happiness is a topic. How do you get more happy? All that. So there's just some good examples.
We hope you are having the best day of your life. If you need something further, just visit one of the Multiview Incorporated websites or contact us through social media. Smoke signals, carrier pigeons, telepathy have not proven reliable. All calls are answered within 3 rings by a competent, real person. Thank you for listening.